What if I told you that one of the deadliest wars in human history began with 2 gunshots on a quiet street? In a matter of seconds, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was dead, alongside his wife Sophie. It was June 28, 1914, in Sarajevo. At first, it looked like a tragic political assassination. But those 2 shots didn't just end 2 lives. They set off a chain reaction that would engulf the entire world in World War I. And the most unsettling part? Almost no one realized in that exact moment that the world had just crossed a point of no return. To understand how something so sudden could lead to such devastation, we need to go deeper. Because this wasn't just an assassination, it was the spark that ignited a world already on the edge.
At the beginning of the 20th century, Europe looked powerful, advanced, and stable. Nations were industrializing, cities were growing, and technology was evolving at a rapid pace. But beneath that surface, tensions were quietly building. Empires dominated the political landscape, and among the most influential was Austria-Hungary, a vast, multi-ethnic empire struggling to maintain control over its diverse population. Alongside it stood the German Empire, a rising military power hungry for influence, and the weakening Ottoman Empire, which had once dominated southeastern Europe but was now losing its grip. Meanwhile, countries like France and United Kingdom were determined to protect their own power and maintain balance. On paper, it looked like a stable system. In reality, it was a delicate structure held together by fear, competition, and fragile alliances. One of the most unstable regions in all of Europe was the Balkans, often referred to as the powder keg of Europe. This region was filled with different ethnic groups, languages, and identities, all competing for independence and recognition. At the center of this tension was Bosnia and Herzegovina, which had been officially annexed by Austria-Hungary in 1908. This decision enraged neighboring Serbia, a nation that saw itself as the leader of Slavic peoples in the region. Serbia had a vision to unite all South Slavs into a single nation, and Bosnia, with its large Slavic population, was a key part of that dream. But Austria-Hungary had no intention of giving it up. The result was a growing hostility that went far beyond politics. It was about identity, pride, and the future of entire peoples. Within Serbia, nationalist sentiment was rising rapidly. Secret societies began to form, driven by the belief that liberation could not be achieved through diplomacy alone. One of the most notorious of these groups was the Black Hand, a covert organization made up of military officers and radicals who were willing to use violence to achieve their goals. Their mission was clear: weaken Austria-Hungary and promote Slavic unity. And when they learned that Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, would be visiting Sarajevo on June 28, 1914, they saw an opportunity they couldn't ignore. That date was not chosen randomly. June 28 was Vidovdan, a deeply symbolic day in Serbian history, marking the anniversary of the Battle of Kosovo in 1389. A moment remembered as both a tragedy and a symbol of resistance. For many Serbs, the presence of an Austro-Hungarian royal figure in Bosnia on such a sacred day felt like a direct insult. It wasn't just a political visit, it was perceived as a statement of dominance. For the Black Hand and its supporters, it was the perfect moment to act. Among those chosen to carry out the mission was a young man named Gavrilo Princip. At just 19 years old, Princip was driven by a powerful sense of nationalism and a belief that his actions could change the course of history.
He and several other conspirators were armed and positioned along the Archduke's motorcade route through Sarajevo. The plan was straightforward. As the cars passed, one of them would strike. But in reality, the plan depended on timing, coordination, and a great deal of luck. As the motorcade began its journey through the city, the tension among the conspirators must have been overwhelming. Each of them waited for the right moment. And then, one of them acted. A bomb was thrown toward the Archduke's car, but it didn't land where it was supposed to. It bounced off the vehicle and exploded beneath the next car in the convoy, injuring several people, but leaving Franz Ferdinand unharmed. In an instant, chaos erupted. The failed attempt could have ended everything right there. Security tightened. The opportunity seemed lost. But incredibly, the Archduke decided to continue with his planned schedule. After attending a reception at the city hall, he made a decision that would unknowingly seal his fate. He insisted on visiting the wounded officers in the hospital, a gesture of concern that required a change in route. And that change, combined with a critical mistake, would alter history forever. As the motorcade set off again, the driver of the Archduke's car was not properly informed of the new route. Following the original plan, he took a wrong turn onto a side street. Realizing the mistake, the driver attempted to reverse the car, but in doing so, the vehicle stalled. And, by an almost unimaginable coincidence, the car had stopped directly in front of a small cafe. Standing outside that cafe was Gavrilo Princip.
Moments earlier, Princip believed the mission had failed. Now, suddenly, the target was right in front of him, exposed, vulnerable, and only a few feet away. There was no time to hesitate. He stepped forward, drew his pistol, and fired 2 shots. The first struck Archduke Franz Ferdinand in the neck. The second hit his wife, Sophie, in the abdomen. Within minutes, both were dead. A mission that had nearly collapsed had succeeded, not because of perfect planning, but because of sheer chance. The immediate aftermath was one of shock and outrage. Austria-Hungary viewed the assassination not just as a terrorist act, but as an attack backed by Serbian nationalism. Although the Serbian government denied direct involvement, the connections between the assassins and nationalist groups within Serbia were enough to fuel suspicion. Austria-Hungary, determined to respond decisively, issued an ultimatum to Serbia, a list of demands so strict that it was almost impossible to accept fully. Serbia agreed to most of the terms, but rejected a few key points, particularly those that would allow Austro-Hungarian officials to operate within Serbian territory. For Austria-Hungary, this partial acceptance was not enough. On July 28, 1914, exactly 1 month after the assassination, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. And this is where the true scale of the situation began to unfold.
Europe at the time was bound together by a complex system of alliances. These alliances were meant to maintain balance and prevent conflict. Instead, they ensured that any conflict would escalate rapidly. Russia, which saw itself as the protector of Slavic nations, mobilized its army in defense of Serbia. Germany, allied with Austria-Hungary, responded by declaring war on Russia. Soon after, Germany declared war on France, Russia's ally. Then, in a strategic move, Germany invaded Belgium to reach France more quickly, violating Belgian neutrality and prompting the United Kingdom to enter the war. In a matter of days, what had started as a regional conflict became a global war. Soldiers marched off believing it would be over quickly. Many thought they would be home by Christmas, but they were wrong. The war dragged on for 4 brutal years, characterized by trench warfare, new and devastating technologies, and unimaginable loss of life. By the time the war ended in 1918, over 16 million people had been killed, and millions more were wounded. Entire empires had collapsed, including Austria-Hungary itself, the German Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and the Russian Empire. The political map of Europe was redrawn, and the consequences of the war would set the stage for even greater conflict in the decades to come. And when we look back at how it all began, it's almost impossible not to be struck by the fragility of it all. If the bomb had succeeded, perhaps the events would have unfolded differently. If the driver hadn't taken a wrong turn, Princip might never have had another chance. If the car hadn't stalled, if Princip hadn't been standing there, if just one small detail had changed, history might have taken a completely different path. But it didn't. And that's what makes this story so powerful and so unsettling, because it shows us that history is not always shaped by grand decisions or carefully planned strategies. Sometimes it's shaped by coincidence, by human error, by moments that seem insignificant at the time, but carry consequences beyond anything anyone could have imagined. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand wasn't just the beginning of a war, it was the moment when a fragile world lost its balance. A single act, carried out in seconds, unleashed forces that could not be contained. And more than a century later, it remains one of the most chilling reminders of how quickly everything can change, and how even the smallest moments can echo through history in ways we may never fully understand.